thank you guys for coming out to this event. I'm really excited to be here. I came up all the way from San Antonio, so hello, rivals. No, I'm just kidding. Teammates is really what it's all about.
We're only 90 miles apart.
I know.
Go
It feels
Spurs!
like, an entire country sometimes. But hopefully my organization will kind of bridge some of that gap. So I'm going to talk today about the Smart Texas Alliance. And there's a lot of IoT projects happening in Texas. I think that the Austin IoT group is a really great example of sort of what's happening organically within the community. But there's a lot of activity happening on the industry side as well as on the government side as well as academia. And so there's a lot of pockets of organic activity happening. And this is just a couple of examples of what's happening, all throughout Texas. And personally, I'm a native of San Antonio. I've been there for, I'm not going to tell you how long, but a long time. And I'm very passionate about my community as well as Texas as a whole. And I think that Texas is a really great place for IoT to be happening. There's a whole bunch of different industries that I think touch on all aspects of what IoT is really capable of. There's a lot of legacy infrastructure markets here, which are really exciting and cool to be digging into, as well as a lot of regional areas. So like you've got really great weather patterns, you have a lot of topography changes and stuff. There's a lot of biodiversity here as well, which makes IoT just perfect to be deployed in-field as well as within the industrial side as well as the retail side. So Texas and specifically IoT, I think, are just kind of a match made in heaven. So you guys are a part of one of the community meetup groups, which is really excellent, and this is a thriving community. Thank you very much, David, for helping organize this and put this together. But there are some challenges. I know you guys probably hear a lot about the hype cycle in IoT and sort of where we are and the limitless possibilities that coincide with it, as well as the negative side. The security aspect to IoT is constantly brought up in discussions and is a terrifying concept. But there are some other challenges too that we're facing in multiple areas. So there's a huge knowledge gap that exists within the industry as well as without. I spent several years working with a consulting firm down in San Antonio, and so within the industry I happen to know that there are a lot of challenges and a lot of educational hurdles to overcome in order for companies to start not only thinking about IoT but also strategizing and then implementing IoT solutions within their organization. And then when you're looking on the outside of the industry, which is everybody else, there's a lot of knowledge gaps that exist there and a lot of misinformation that gets thrown about. And so it's very challenging to talk about IoT in concrete terms in order for people to understand. I believe there was a study done back in 2015 that identified between 70 and 80-something% of the general population have no concept of IoT. And if they do have a concept, it's very limited and has a focus on consumer electronics, which is only one part of the IoT conversation. And so there's a lot of barriers when you're getting into discussions with people in IoT. For the most part, I can't talk about what I do with people. I tell them I'm a technology leader and I did that. There's also a knowledge gap about the resources that are available, not just for those who are in the industry, but from a municipality perspective. Smart cities is a huge topic of conversation and like figuring out how to get that funded. But then you have a huge thriving startup community that's really starting to dig into IoT and the resources for, okay, I have these great ideas, I have these prototypes, where do I go, how do I make those connections? That's still a barrier for a lot of people as well as the opportunities that exist. So raise your hand if you're a subject matter expert who's been in your field for 5+ years, but has a lot of really great ideas and difficult finding people to talk to. Okay, well, I think, yeah, there we go. We have some people, which is good. Everybody else, I guess you're very loquacious and good for you. Another challenge that we really face is complexity. IoT, while you can define it as a physical network of internet-enabled devices, there's a lot more at play. There's a lot of attempts to define it at a much broader space. I believe Cisco and a few others are utilizing the Internet of Everything as a working definition for not just talking about the physical systems, but the impact on the people and processes and some of the other social impacts that go into IoT. But when you're looking at 70 to 80% of the general population having a misconception or no information about what it is, it's really hard to make IoT a subset of something else. You're sort of skipping a couple of steps. The deployment aspect. So traditionally, it takes about 18 to 24 months for an IoT solution to be successfully planned for and then deployed, which is a lot of runtime before you get some ROI going. Now that has definitely increased over the last few years, which is really exciting. There are some that can just get up and going, but I've had conversations with companies in the past where it takes over a year of initial conversations before we can sit down and start actually planning out their IoT strategy. And then if you add another maybe 2 years on top of that before you start getting some return on investments, that's just daunting. And a lot of companies don't want to wait that long to start getting started, I guess, or to be able to start profiting. The sustainability and the longevity of an IoT solution too, because we are still in the process of having the market roll up in a lot of ways. We're waiting for some really strong industry leaders to come about. There's still maturation that needs to occur. Future-proofing your solutions or being able to properly define sort of when you're going to need to reassess your IoT solution or your IoT deployment gets incredibly complicated, and there's a big question mark in a lot of areas, particularly for large-scale deployments and in areas where you're having a lot of non-technical individuals take place. So smart cities is a really great example. You know, people who are on the hook for rolling out solutions that are supposed to last decades and having to figure out how they're going to be able to reiterate as, you know, more technology and new sensors and new systems come into play. And then the management of an IoT solution. Raise your hand in here if you are a technical engineer or technically focused individual. Okay, raise your hand in here if you're not. Right, okay, great. So IoT is extending way beyond just sort of the technical and engineering aspects, and a lot of people who are non-technical people are being asked to start thinking about and understanding these very complex systems and then also managing them. And it goes back to that knowledge gap. If you have that foundational knowledge gap about sort of how to approach the market in general and then sort of how you're going to be dealing with this and where you fit, it can be really hard to make accurate business decisions as well as personal or even citywide decisions. And then fragmentation. Fragmentation exists everywhere. We call it, you know, being siloed. There's silos that exist in companies, there's silos that exist in cities and in countries. It's a really hard problem to solve, and it's just something that really plagues the IoT industry. And when you're talking about having a connected world at some point, you have to start figuring out how to cross-pollinate and break down some of those siloed discussions. So the Smart Taxes Alliance and kind of how do we fit into this whole ecosystem. We're an educational nonprofit. We got started back in October of last year. We received statewide recognition in November, and we are now a recognized charity by the federal government. We've received our tax exempt status, which is really exciting. And we are focused on building a dynamic Internet of Things community across Texas. Really what we serve as the connective tissue. If you have all of these pockets of activity, you have industry leaders here in Texas, you have startup companies, you have a lot of independent projects, and subject matter experts who are constantly working on their own vision of IoT and all of these products and services. That's fantastic. You also have the government side, so you have municipalities as well as the state level government looking at how they're going to start incorporating IoT in their vision, not just as a state, then also too from an economic development perspective and from an educational perspective, and there's a lot of gray areas associated with that, as well as academia. I was really impressed last year when I attended the Smart Cities Summit here in Austin. I thought that that was an amazing presentation that the city put on with its partners. And I was really pleased to see that UT Austin had about a third of the expo floor devoted to graduate level projects focused on transportation and mobility solutions. I thought that that was really kick-ass, excuse me, but I thought that was fantastic and a really great way to bring all of those elements together. And so my organization, sitting as a nonprofit organization focused on industry education and awareness, really serves as the connective tissue between all of those three areas and really fostering those relationships and creating that cross-pollination on multiple levels. So we have a couple of different services that we offer. The knowledge as a service consulting should be clarified a little bit. The organization is not meant to come in and solve business solutions or city solutions. It's really meant to help educate people about the industry itself and sort of where they could potentially fit or who they could go talk to about pursuing IoT. There's workshops, hackathons, some major IoT events, which I will talk about towards the end about some of the people that I'm starting to bring to the table. Networking opportunities to start getting customers connected with vendors. Much of the national shows are just vendor events, which is really great because you get to know about what everybody else is doing in the industry, but it's really hard for you to make connections with customers. And it's really hard for subject matter experts to find opportunities for themselves. So there's a lot of barriers associated with that my organization is going to overcome. Content generation and distribution. There's a lot happening I think that RCR Wireless and the ATX Studio, as well as a lot of smaller publications throughout the state, is really pushing forth a lot of information about the Internet of Things, which is fantastic. But we still don't have quite of a unified approach in order to better holistically manage sort of what is happening in Texas and to serve as a unified resource for all of that kind of content, which is what my organization is also hoping to address. And then research and surveys, because being a nonprofit organization, you need to operate with a level of transparency, and you need to be very clear about the impact that you're having on the community to make sure that those donors and sponsors are very aware of how you're spending those funds. And so it's looking at Texas holistically and what our vision is for IoT and kind of how we're going to work together, and then what the impact of all of these initiatives are. So we focus on IoT education and awareness, partnership development, and community engagement. We work with everyone. One of the reasons why we approached this as a nonprofit is because we didn't want to get tied down in working with specific partners. We really wanted to open up the playing field in a way that made this information very accessible to people, as well as a lot of the opportunities accessible. So that's just, an example of who we would want to participate. We are community-minded, which is one of the reasons why I'm more than happy to drive, from San Antonio, which isn't that big of a deal, but I drove all the way to Austin last week for another event. I think that the connected world that we talk about means that we need to start building bridges and fostering those relationships across the different pockets of activity. The insight, so the real value is in the data and what you do with the data and who owns the data and how that's really going to drive us forward. And so through the organization, with all of the information we're going to be publishing, is really about making IoT not just accessible but digestible for people inside and outside. And then leadership, really wanting to identify those who are invested in the community itself, not just within San Antonio, but in the state of Texas, and wanting to find those subject matter experts, as well as those core partners and sponsors who are really committed to creating a holistic vision for IoT. Our core pillars, accessibility, being future-minded, wanting to make sure that not only are we talking about IoT in the next 5 years, but sort of how we're positioning ourselves for emerging technologies over the next couple of decades, and how Texas is going to participate in a much larger conversation about emerging technologies. And then collaborative, which just sort of goes back to that community-minded aspect. How to participate. So I'm very excited that now that we've received our 501c3 status, we're going to start our fundraising opportunities next month. Because we're going to be doing a very scaled approach, the independent membership is going to be free and available to anybody who wants to participate. Company membership is a different discussion, but that's not something that's on the table for the next couple of years. Right now we're really focused at having a phase 1 and phase 2 approach with core partners and sponsors who are invested in building a smart state, and how we're going to build out the foundation of the organization as well as the networks. This is my contact information. I have a couple of business cards as well to talk about some of the projects, to give you a scope of sort of how this company works with other organizations. Currently, I'm in the process of planning a hackathon in San Antonio. It's going to be over the course of 2 weekends that should be launched sometime in the third quarter, looking at providing a very holistic vision of what IoT is, so having all aspects of the value chain present within the hackathon. So there should be a cybersecurity company that's giving a presentation, as well as someone from a business perspective, finding sustainable companies and teams in order to grow real solutions for the community. It's going to have people not just from San Antonio, but I'm also looking at transplanting some people from Dallas and Austin and outside of Texas as well, to really start getting that cross-pollination moving forward. And there will be more information later on about the kind of goals and awards that will be presented. There's also an education play that's being discussed right now with one of the schools in San Antonio, one of the STEM-oriented schools, about rolling out some IoT curriculum and some education opportunities with some hardware providers as well for some community-oriented projects. And I'm hoping next quarter to roll out our first webinar presentation as well, with some subject matter experts on data architecture. And that basically sums up my presentation. It's a little bit different. It's not a very technical presentation, but there's a lot of impact that IoT brings to the table, and it runs across all different kinds of markets. And so if you are going to be thinking about IoT, you have to separate yourself a little bit from just the industry with the technical speak and understand that there's a lot more opportunity on the table for everybody. And I'll open that up for some questions. Yes, David?
Yeah, I believe that the work that you're doing is very important and also very in line with my vision when I started this group, to be a community organization, so it's a place where we would all come and learn together. Yeah, I'd like to invite you to maintain a connection to us, maybe through a Slack channel or something.
Oh, absolutely. And I use Slack in my own personal stuff, and I'm hoping to implement that as my company grows. So I would love to stay in contact with you.
Excellent.
I didn't give a background on myself and sort of what my qualifications are, so I apologize. I've been working in the IoT industry for about 5 years now. I started off as a secondary researcher at a consulting firm in San Antonio within their end-to-end division, and then I finished my degree at a private university in San Antonio, and I was brought in as a senior research analyst and director of content for the consulting firm that I worked for in San Antonio for about 3 years. And I realized that just there were a lot of challenges that existed in the industry, and with all of the companies that were coming to our organization asking for help, I had the idea that maybe the industry itself alone wasn't enough to answer some of those questions, and that there really needed to be an organization that served as the connective tissue. And then I was thinking, okay, well, I'm headquartered in San Antonio, and I can do that in San Antonio, but IoT's vision is much larger than just one city. So to think about holistically managing the activity in Texas and what role we're going to play is incredibly crucial, because there's a lot of stuff that gets generated out of Texas that tends to get utilized elsewhere, particularly San Antonio from a research perspective, because we have a lot of very quiet, very serious markets in biomed and aerospace engineering and a whole bunch of other things. And so it's really important to start opening up the platform of conversation, elevating what's already happening and unifying that, because we're moving in that direction anyways, and there needs to be some sort of holistic connective tissue that's allowing us to maximize our opportunities together. Anybody else? Yes, David.
I'm trying to think of a way to form the question, but if I'm an individual or an organization that has a smart city product, is there a way, do you help, how do you suggest we go from the idea to getting into the right context in the city to get them to look at implementing?
So that is definitely that's a really great question. And I've actually been approached by several independent companies who are looking at ways to get their ideas in front of municipal representatives and figure out how they can start helping their community achieve better things. And I think that that's going to have to be very targeted events. There's a really great organization where you guys can look it up. It's called Mass Innovation Nights. It's put on by this really wonderful woman named, oh gosh, I can't remember her name right now, but she's fantastic, and she's based in Massachusetts. So it's Innovation Nights, and it's really focused on having those kinds of meetings where you have either potential customers, potential investors, or maybe even people from the community come, and you have presentations, so that way they can actually start identifying local subject matter experts or local companies that could solve some of their challenges for them in a platform that operates on a monthly basis, and so you can have someone manage that very easily. My organization is looking at having very specific oriented events as well. I think from a municipal perspective with smart cities, it's a lot to ask for in some instances when you have a lot of people who are on the chopping block for rolling out solutions, citywide solutions, and to have a proof of concept or not have a proven track record necessarily, it can be it's a very tenuous thing for a city to consider. But I still think that there's a lot of opportunity in presenting new ideas and startups to cities, so that way they at least understand what's being generated in their own ecosystem and how they can sort of feed back into each other. Yes, David.
Joyce, do you know Hal Martin at all?
I don't.
Okay. He runs out of 10 Capital Group.
Oh, okay.
He helps people with ideas get money.
Well, I think that's a fantastic thing for sure.
Yeah.
There's a really great organization that's getting started up in San Antonio right now. They've actually been around for a couple of years now, and it's called Epicenter. And it's going to be a focused innovation and an energy-focused innovation and IoT incubator down in San Antonio. It's going to take over 5 acres and an old plant that was built in 1909. I wrote a blog about it today. Actually, there's having an event on the 1st. You can go ahead and sign up and register to attend. To get started, kind of plugged into what they're doing, but they're really looking at heavily investing in IoT and startup and innovation community-oriented projects, and not just in San Antonio, but elsewhere.
Maybe we could get them to present too.
I think that would be a phenomenal idea.
Yeah.
That would be really thrilling, actually. And there's a handful of other organizations too that off the top of mind I can't think of, but if you want to send me an email, I can go through my contacts and find ways to make those connections for you on your behalf.
Awesome, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Yes, James.
If this Austin IoT meetup fit within the umbrella of Smart Texas, what would be your vision for this meetup? What role would it?
That's a really great question.
Yeah, it is.
So in addition to, while you guys post up on Meetup, that's phenomenally awesome. I'm not sure really what your social media output is, or who's managing that.
Nobody, we don't have anybody.
Right, so
We're looking for volunteers.
So the organization would probably find a way to streamline or at least automatically update when you're having new events on a regional perspective, as well as have someone be able to get in touch with David or somebody else who's organizing the event for other speakers and stuff to kind of inject into the Austin community about companies that are doing business in Austin or who want to do business in Austin, or from a larger scope of IoT in general. So there are some other organizations too that could be really great presenters. And then, San Antonio, as far as I know, doesn't have an IoT meetup group, but they do have an active cybersecurity meetup group called Cyber Dev Dojo. It's phenomenal. I went to one of their special series engagement sessions on IoT security, and it was pretty excellent. So there is some IoT pockets that are developing in San Antonio all the time, but I think that this is a really rich and mature organization for involvement.
Thank you.
Yes.
The first time I heard of the IoT and smart city is actually 10 years ago when I was in China.
Yeah.
So at that time I didn't know the term IoT.
Mhm.
So it seems to me that US is a bit trailing behind in IoT and related.
No, I would definitely agree with you,
So-
particularly in the APAC region.
Yeah.
With the smart cities adoption, the Asian markets are leading as far as those kinds of projects and the scale of those projects.
So I hope your organization can promote the idea to influence the government. So it seems to me that US, because I travel back
Sure.
between China and US quite often,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe because the infrastructure is not that, like in China, a lot of things they build from scratch, so they don't
Mhm.
have the legacy. So
Right.
they hardly adopt the new technology.
Well, and that's
So-
something that's really difficult here when and my organization is the Smart Texas Alliance, and we are focused on smart state, but there are a lot of smart city initiatives that are doing really well. The Dallas Innovation Alliance is a really great example of a public-private partnership between the DFW and the Metroplex region, as well as the National City Council of Governments. It's NTC-COG is their abbreviated form, and I think collectively they've poured $120 million into smart transportation development, and they're currently revitalizing the West End district in downtown Dallas. And I sort of lost my train of thought, but retrofitting old systems is incredibly challenging for people to look at, and so when you're doing new developments, it's really easy to start implementing smart systems and getting that whole train moving forward, but it can be really complicated from a cost perspective of just having to go in and rip up old infrastructure or update it. It's getting better all the time, I have to say that for sure. Sorry.
For instance, I really want to hope that the traffic light system in Austin can be smarter. It's
Oh, that would be
dumb
great.
right now to me.
Flying cars would solve that problem.
Well, you would think. Yes.
So I have a related question, right? So the smart city concept, right? Are you aware of any initiative where the smart city concept is being planned for a smaller city? Because I'm not talking about Dallas or Austin, but
No,
a small
absolutely.
city, like a
So-
population of 500 or less, or whatever,
Yes.
right? Like
There's
a
some
prototype.
really great examples of that. I know what I was trying to make a point about is even though my organization is focused on the smart state, it's not completely focused on smart cities. There's a lot of activity going all the time for smart city development and public-private partnerships and sort of the vision of Texas. I believe the Dallas Innovation Alliance is really looking at being the organization to sort of lead the way and holistically manage all of that from a smart state perspective. But because IoT touches on numerous markets and a lot of infinite capacities, the opportunity for education or the need for education is much wider than the smart cities discussion. And because if your foundational information on what IoT is lacking, when you're trying to put together or deploy smart city solutions, you're operating under faulty information to begin with. So you really need to start targeting some of the foundational conversations before you can get into smart city discussions, because that's sort of the convergence of all of these technologies coming together. To answer your question, though, about smaller cities that are implementing smart city solutions, I was in a panel well, I wasn't on the panel, but I was at CTIA Supermobility last year, and there was a really great panel discussion with the mayor from Kansas City, Missouri, as well as the mayor of Georgia, I'm sorry, not Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, excuse me, and the CIO of Illinois. And what the Kansas City mayor was talking about was, even though his community was much smaller and on a smaller scale than Atlanta, they were still able to aggressively roll out smart city solutions, and they were probably able to do it more quickly, and they were more agile with it because they were a smaller city. So I would encourage you to look up sort of those kinds of things. But in Texas itself, there's a lot of smaller cities doing stuff. So I don't know if you guys know of Silver Spring Networks, but New Braunfels, Texas actually was rolling out smart grid solutions with Silver Spring Networks, I think in 2015, in an effort to sort of prepare for the growing population between Austin and San Antonio. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, you just mentioned one of them, but I'm curious, like, what kind of initiatives are you aware of? Like, what type of things are the cities trying to solve that they don't have solutions for at the moment?
Well,
I mean, what are the opportunities, I guess?
Traffic is probably
Since you got the
number one.
inside track.
Traffic is one of the go-to things. So at this event in Dallas, which was the North Texas Smart Cities Summit that had a focus on smart transportation and mobility, they had several presentations from the U.S. Department of Transportation that was looking at vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure solutions. There's several pilot studies that are being done. There was also a discussion from another individual from the U.S. Department of Transportation that was looking at the concept of mega regions. And when you're looking at a sustainability factor as well as transportation and a whole bunch of other things, a mega region could come into play and sort of, in my opinion, maybe redefine some boundaries when you're looking at management. I think that transportation is one of the quickest ways that cities can sort of implement some traffic monitoring systems or some digital signage stuff and see some real measurement of impact. There's also CPS Energy is rolling out a citywide smart utility meter initiative right now over the next two to 3 years. So all of San Antonio should be connected with smart meters. And then obviously water usage. Yep. Figuring out how to better manage. And it's not even just having the impact of having any sort of water meter is really substantial. So a couple years ago, Ireland got into a whole big kerfuffle because they finally put water meters, and not even smart water meters, on their water infrastructure for the country. And there were a lot of people who were really upset because they were getting billed for water for the first time ever. And they realized that because the infrastructure was incredibly old, there was a lot of leaks, and so some of the bills were astronomical and ridiculous. And so just even having any sort of metering available makes a huge difference. And then when you kick that up a notch with intelligent metering, it can be incredibly just astounding. There was a pilot study done by a company in Louisville, Texas, and they did a pilot over a month where they put connected water meters on all of the residential areas in the community for a month. And they projected out over a 10-year period of time that they could save the residents and the city $10 billion and 60 billion gallons of water. So when you're talking about the impacts of IoT, and specifically from a smart city sustainability perspective, it's really astounding. But there's a lot of information out there all the time, and it's really hard to keep up because everybody's organically working on projects, and so it's kind of daunting to be dealing with. Yes, David?
two other areas of application that I could think of is farming and
Yeah.
mesh networking.
Connectivity is going to be a huge thing, and figuring out just sort of how we're all going to work together is really, I'm curious to see how NB-IoT shapes up in comparison to LoRa and some of the other LPWAN technologies out there, but it's really going to require a lot of us working together in order to make these solutions seamless. Yes.
You mentioned LoRa. That's the proprietary five-layer technology, right?
It's a standard of low power wide area.
Okay.
So there's a lot of other people that play in this space, but they have a specific spectrum, and they're really looking at creating they're a standard organization,
So,
as well as the technology.
okay. Did you just mention that San Antonio is going to deploy the smart meter, right?
Yeah, the CPS, so the energy provider for the city is rolling out smart energy meters on all of the residential properties in San Antonio.
Does it use the LoRa or the gigabit?
I'm actually not certain about what technology that they use, but I know that the city itself has worked extensively with Cradle Point technology as well for rolling out their smart transportation initiatives. Yes.
If Shreveport and Lake Charles wanted to participate in Smart Texas, would you be willing to cheat them?
No. No, I mean, I think that really depends. You know, it's finding ways to work cohesively with other people, including people outside of Texas. You know, Smart Texas might be the place to start, but you know, these kinds of services could benefit a lot of people, and the smaller the town, the need is almost greater in some instances for being able to help them sort of bridge the great shift, as we're calling this thing, towards automation and as resources dry up for rural communities. Are there any additional questions or comments that I could address or answer? I would be happy to.
So can we get your help directly? Can we?
Yeah, currently, so because the organization is very nascent, it's myself and a board of advisors. So when you contact my organization, you are contacting me directly, and I'm happy to help you any way I can.
And hopefully you'll be connected to us through our Slack team.
Oh, and that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And I would love to get all of your information too, so I can, you know, find ways to utilize your expertise as well, because, you know, IoT isn't about one individual or one technology or one device. It's about all of us working cohesively together.
Definitely.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.